how to display the web pages in our Android application. Still, we have not completed the application. Just we started the WebView component. We started. We taken a text box. We taken. If user is given any URL, we are displaying that URL will display on the WebView component we are displaying. Okay. Let me open that project. So last class project name is WebView test is a project name. WebView test is a project. We added internet permission. We added in the manifest.xml because we are using what? We are accessing the internet. We are accessing. That's why we added this permission. We added. Okay. Next. So in the main activity.java class, when user clicks this, when user click any one of these buttons, first open that XML file. This is what the UI we created. This is the UI we created in the XML file. So UI we created. We taken a URL we taken. So user is going to enter the URL in this text box. When user clicks the search button, display that particular web page on the WebView component. Okay, and Facebook, Google, YouTube, and HTML. So we done with the first one. When user clicks any URL, when user given any URL in the text box, and when user clicks the search button, display that particular web page on the WebView component. So that logic we already written. And we already configured the click event, we already configured for all these buttons. Even if you click any button, internally it is calling a method call. Test method it is calling here. By using ID, we are identifying whether you got a request from which component. Okay. In case of search button, we return the logic. For example, in case of Facebook, what is the logic we did? WebView.load URL of. Here we had to write the logic for displaying the Facebook page. Here we had to write the logic for displaying what? Facebook page. HTTP www.facebook.com. Okay. So when user clicks the Google button, so display the Google page here. Okay, HTML is different. We'll write the HTML logic. We'll write so Facebook, Google, and YouTube. So we are displaying these web pages. We are displaying on the WebView component. We are displaying when you click that particular button. Okay, let's run the application and see the output once. So I'm installing the app. Let's run the app. It's loading still. So now the first thing is completed. We already completed this first thing. We already completed. When user give any URL and when user clicks the search button, we are displaying that particular URL. We are displaying on the WebView component. We are displaying that particular URL. Okay. Now let's see these controls. When user clicks the Facebook button, see I selected Facebook. I selected. See what will happen. It's taking some time to preview. Okay. So when I select the Facebook button, it is asking for the browser. Okay. So then what you have to do is you have to select any one of the browser you have to select. You have to select any one of the browser you have to select to open that particular web page. We have to select any one of the browser you have to select, and it is open the web page. It is open in the browser. It is opened. It is open the web page. It is open what in a browser. It is open the web page. But our requirement is not this one. Our requirement is not to open in the browser. If it is opening the data in a browser, if it is opening the data in a browser, the problem is nothing but Browser is a different application. That's not our application, right? So when you select the Google button, see it is asking, do you want to open this Google in a separate browser? You want to open this Google page in a separate browser? Do you want to open this one? But my requirement is not to open in a browser. For just if you want to call a browser, if you want to call, we don't require that. We don't require the WebView component and all. We are having a concept called intent concept is there. By using intent concept, you can load the browser. You can load. Okay. So now here, the particular web page has to integrate in our application. The particular web page has to integrate in our application. There is a requirement. Okay. So if you want to integrate the web page, if you want to integrate in your app itself, if you want to integrate that web page, so we have to set this method. We have to set to the WebView component. So there is a method called WebView dot WebView dot. There is a method called set WebView client is a method. WebView dot set WebView client is a method. WebView dot set WebView client is a method. So this for this WebView client method, we have to specify the object of WebView client class object. We have to specify WebView component dot. There is a method called what? Set WebView client is a method. We have to specify the object of WebView client class object. We have to specify. We had to specify the object of WebView client class object. We had to specify to the WebView component. So once if you set this one, automatically now the browser will integrate in your app itself. The browser will integrate. The browser will integrate in app itself. The browser will integrate. Okay. So okay. Now here in your activity on create method, here we initialize the browser, right? Here we initialize the browser. We initialized here. Let's see here. WebView component dot. What is the method name? Set WebView client is a method. WebView component dot. There is a method called what? Set WebView client is a method. Set WebView client is a method. Specify the object of WebView client class. Specify the object of what? WebView client class. WebView dot set WebView client. Specify the object of WebView client class object will specify. Okay. So once if you set this object, just only once if you set this method, if you set to the WebView component, it will not navigate to browser, it will not navigate. Earlier it is navigating to browser, it is navigating. Now the particular pages it will not navigate to browser, it will not navigate. Let's see here. WebView.set WebView client, specify the object of WebView client class. So now the page app is installed. When you click on this Facebook button, it will display the Facebook page, it will display on the WebView component. When you click on this Facebook button, the Facebook page will display on the WebView component, it will display. Earlier it is navigating to browser, it is navigating earlier, but now the page is integrated on the WebView component, it is integrated. So when you click on this Google button, display the Google page on the WebView component. I selected YouTube, I selected. YouTube I selected. Let's see what is the message is showing in YouTube. Facebook is working fine. Facebook page is displayed. Next. Google is working fine. It is displayed the Google page. But if you click on this Facebook button, if you click on this YouTube button, if you click on the YouTube button, we are getting this empty screen we are getting. And I select this YouTube. It is showing an empty screen. Before that, what is that? This WebView client is having three major methods. WebView client is having what? Three major methods. Following are three major methods in WebView client class. Following are the three major methods. Following are the three major methods in WebView client class. Following are the three major methods in WebView client class. There are three methods are there. One is just give me a minute. On page loading started is one method. On page loading started is one method. On page loading is started. Next, should override URL loading. on page loading started should override URL loading, and on page finished. These are the three major methods in the WebView client class. On page finished. These are the three major methods in the WebView client class. These are the three major methods in the WebView client class. On page started, should override URL loading, and on page finished. These are the three methods. So when the page loading is started, if any web page loading is started, it's going to call on page started method is going to call. If any page loading is started, it's going to call on page started method is going to call. At the time of loading the data, it's going to call should override URL loading method. At the time of loading the data, it will call should override URL loading method. And once the page loading is done, and once the page loading process is completed, it's going to call on page finished method. Once the page loading process is completed, it is going to call on page finished method is going to call. It's going to call what? On page finished method is going to call. Okay, these are the three major methods in the WebView client class. These are the three major methods in WebView client class. Okay. So now here, meaning if you want to perform any pre-action before the page loading is started, write that logic in on page started method. At the time of loading the data, should override. So after the page loading is done, if you want to do anything, then write the logic in the on page finished method. Just what I'm doing is, let's override these three methods. These three methods are available inside the WebView client. These three methods are available inside the WebView client class. So after this WebView client, so open this flower bracket and give an enter. Repeat again. There are three methods are there in the WebView client class. We have to provide the implementation. We have to provide for the three methods. Just open this flower bracket and give an enter. Okay. So here there are three methods are there. One is on page started is one method. On page started is one method. Next, what is another one? Should override URL loading is one method, and the third thing is nothing but on page finished is the third method. On page finished. These are the three methods in the WebView client class. These are the three methods in WebView client class. On page started, should override URL loading, and on page finished method. So just for demo, whether these methods are calling or not, because in the real time, you'll get a requirement of using these methods. Okay, so just for demonstration, whether these methods are calling or not, I'm displaying a toast message. I'll display here. Here I'll display a toast message in the on page loading started method. Toast.makeText get application context, comma get application context. Second parameter specify the message. What is the message you want to display? So I want to display a message is page loading started. This is the message I'm displaying here. Page loading started. Comma. So length underscore long. Duration is length underscore longer. Show is the method. Okay. So meaning in the on page started method, just I'm displaying a toast message. Page loading is what? Started. Let's copy this logic. And in the should override URL loading method, in should override URL loading method, the second thing I want to display URL. See, right now it is loading which web page it is loading. Which web page it is loading, it is giving that URL it is giving here. The second parameter, I'm giving URL, I'm giving the second parameter. Second parameter, I'm giving what? URL. Which web page it is loading on the WebView component now. The next thing is nothing but on page finished method. In on page finished method, specifying here page loading is started and page loading is finished. Okay, so these are the three methods in the WebView client class. So if you want to perform any pre and post actions, so we override these three methods will override in the WebView client class. So write the logic in these three methods. Just for demo, we are displaying a toast messages we are displaying here. Let's run the application now. Let's see if these methods are calling or not. So app is installed. When you click on this Facebook button, when you click on this Facebook button, it will display the Facebook page. It will display. So it is showing the URL. It is showing here. First, it is showing the URL, which web page it is loading. On page loading started. Page loading is started. Then after that, you will get the URL. You will get which web page it is calling. Here, this software is taking some time to display preview. Yeah, I'm selecting this Google. I'm selecting now. When you select this Google, page loading is started. Then after that, it is displaying which web page it is loading. It will give that particular web page URL. It will give. Okay, and then after that, it is going to call on page finished method. When the three methods are calling, that internally the three methods are calling in the WebView component. The WebView client class on page started should override URL loading and on page finished methods are calling. Okay. So if you want to perform any pre and post actions, write the logic in these methods. So Facebook is working fine, Google is working fine, but if you select this YouTube, if you select this YouTube application, if you select, then it will show you a message. It will show you here. If you select this YouTube application, if you select, it is showing a message. It is showing in the bottom. See, try to read that message. What is the message displaying here? Please enable JavaScript on your browser. Meaning we are creating our own browser kind of thing we are creating, right? We are creating our own browser now. Internally by using WebView component, we are creating our own browser kind of application we are creating. See what is the message is showing here? Please enable JavaScript on your browser. Okay, so how will enable the JavaScript? Because maybe YouTube application is using some JavaScript logic. Maybe YouTube application is using some JavaScript logic for displaying the web pages. So that's what it is asking specially enable the JavaScript in your browsers. Let's see how to enable that one. By default, WebView will not enable. By default, WebView will not enable JavaScript and Zoom controls. By default, WebView will not allow JavaScript and Zoom controls. By default, WebView will not allow JavaScript and Zoom controls. To enable JavaScript and Zoom controls, to enable JavaScript and Zoom controls, set the following methods. Set the following methods to WebView component. Set the following methods to what? WebView component. By default, the WebView will not enable what? The JavaScript as well as Zoom controls. These two things, the WebView component will not enable. Okay, so explicitly we have to enable this JavaScript as well as Zoom controls. We have to enable these. Explicitly we have to enable JavaScript and Zoom controls. Let's see how to enable this one. So WebView dot there is a method called getSettings is a method. Your WebView object dot there is a method called getSettings is a method. WebView dot getSettings dot there is a method called set JavaScript enable is one method. Set JavaScript enable of, let's make it true. WebView dot getSettings dot set JavaScript enable true is one thing, and WebView dot getSettings dot set built-in Zoom controls of true. Set built-in Zoom controls of what? Make it true. WebView dot getSettings dot set JavaScript enable true, and WebView dot getSettings dot set built-in Zoom controls of true. We had to set these two methods. We had to set to the WebView component. Had to set. We had to set these two things. We had to set to the WebView component. We had to set. These two components had to set to what? WebView component had to set. So If you set these two things, automatically enable the JavaScript will enable, as well as you'll get the zoom controls also you'll get automatically. Okay. Now let's try to set these two things to the WebView component. So here, after setting this WebView client and before closing your onCreate method, after setting the WebView client and before closing the onCreate method, WebView dot, what is the method name? Get settings dot WebView dot get settings dot set JavaScript enable is one thing. Make it what? True. And WebView dot get settings dot set built-in zoom controls of make it true. WebView dot get settings dot set JavaScript enable true, and WebView dot get settings dot set built-in zoom controls of true. So we have to make these two things. We have to make true. So it will enable the JavaScript as well as it will enable the zoom controls also. You'll get automatically. Okay. Let's run the application now. Let's see that we are getting the zoom controls and the JavaScript support or not. So click on this Facebook button. I mean, earlier we got the issue with the YouTube, right? If first I selected Facebook is selected, page loading is started. Which web page is loading? The URL will give you. Next page loading finished. Okay. Earlier we got the issue with the YouTube button. So it is showing a message called enable JavaScript. Now enable the JavaScript to enable. Let's click on this YouTube button. Click on YouTube. It is showing the YouTube page. It is showing here. Earlier it is given a message. Please enable JavaScript. Now it is giving it is displaying the YouTube application. It is displaying. Okay. So this is enable the JavaScript and zoom controls. So now these three controls are working fine. This Facebook, Google, and YouTube. These controls are working fine now. So in your application, just for example, I'm loading these web pages. In your application, if you have a requirement of displaying the web pages in your application, we use this WebView component. Apart from displaying the web pages, even we can use the HTML file also. We can display. Like some people will ask a question like, is it possible to design the user interface in HTML than XML? Is it possible to design the user interface for Android in place of XML file? So I want to use HTML. I want to use for designing the user interface. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. So in place of XML file, you can use HTML. You can use as a user in UI creation. By using HTML also, you can design the UI. You can design. Okay, now let's see the last one. We'll see how to display the HTML files in Android and how can we get the data from that HTML UI components into our activity class. So when user clicks the HTML button, I want to display HTML page. I want to display on the WebView component, right? Okay. So first I'll create on some HTML file. I'll create first. So it requires a little bit HTML knowledge as well as JavaScript knowledge is also required for this concept. What we are going to discuss. A little bit of HTML knowledge and JavaScript knowledge is required to understand this last one, how to display the HTML files. Okay, let's see here. First, create an HTML file. Which HTML file you want to display? Let's create an HTML file first. That HTML file we had to place in the assets folder. We had to place. I'll give the syntax here. How to display the HTML files, right? How to display HTML file. So if you want to display HTML file, if you want to display, first in your project, you can find a folder called assets. First in your project, you can find a folder called what? Assets is a folder name. In your project, assets is a folder name. In this assets folder, let's place a HTML file. In assets folder, let's place the HTML file in the assets folder. whatever the HTML file you want to display, whatever the HTML file you want to display, let's place that HTML file in the assets folder. Let's place the HTML file in which folder? In assets folder. Okay, so in our project, okay, if you want to display that HTML file, if you want to display, webview.load URL is the method. Webview.load URL is the method. Here we have to specify the URL. We have to specify here, that is file. Then after the file, we have to specify this forward slashes. We have to specify 3 forward slashes file. So give 3 forward slashes. Then after that, give this one, Android underscore asset file, Android underscore asset slash the file name dot html. Which web page you want to display? Let's specify that HTML file here. Webview.load URL file, Android underscore asset is a folder name, and specify the file name dot html. Okay, what is the HTML file you want to display? Okay, so it's mandatory. After this file, you have to specify these 3 forward slashes and Android underscore asset, not assets. Folder name is assets, but here when you are specifying the path, Android underscore asset is a file path. Okay. Now here, let's create that assets folder first. In your project, just right click on the project, right click on the app. You can find the option called new here. You can find the option called new. In this new option, you can find Android resource directory. Here you can find the option called folder. Right click on this app. You can find the option called new. In new, select the option called what? Folder. In folder, select this assets folder. After selecting that folder option, select what? Assets folder. Select this assets folder. Select what? Assets folder. So by default in our project, we got a folder called assets folder. We got by default in our project. I'll repeat again. By default in our project, we got a folder called what? Assets is a folder we got. Now in this assets folder, let's create the HTML file in this assets folder. Let's create the HTML file in this assets folder. Right click on this assets, create a new file. We create assets folder we created. Right click on that assets folder, select the option called new option here. In this new, select the option called what? File. And this new, select the option called what? File. Specify the file name here. What is the file name? Let's specify here. For example, I'm specifying login.html is a file name. In assets, we are creating a HTML file we are creating. What is the file name? Login.html is a file we are creating. Login.html is a file we are creating. So in this login.html file, let's create a HTML file here. Header by header tag. In this login.html, we are creating a file we are creating with the header tag, head tag. Next. Sorry. Wait. What is the main root tag? HTML, right? I'm creating a simple HTML file I'm creating a simple HTML file. Applying some background color for this one. What is the text color? Text color, I want to display the white color, I want to display the text color. We are creating a HTML file we are creating. We are creating out a HTML file we are creating. Right click on this assets, select option called what? File. A new file. Specify the file name .html extension. Okay. Now in this body tag, let's create. I want to align with the center. I want to align. Align center. Okay, I want to align what? Center I want to align. And I want to create a table I want to create. I want to create a table. border is equals to 2I specified. I created what? A table I created here. In this table, total I want to create 4 rows. I want to create totally. Total I want to create how many rows? 4 rows. So I told you, right, to understand this one, you require some a little bit of JavaScript knowledge as well as HTML knowledge is required. Okay. So you want to create 4 table rows. I mean 4 rows I want to create. Okay. Again, each row contains 2 columns. Again, each row contains how many columns? 2 columns. So 2 TD by TD tag that is specified. Again, each row contains how many columns? 2 columns. But the first column I want to occupy, 2 columns I want to occupy the first one. First one I want to occupy 2 columns I want to occupy. So TD call span is equals to what? 2I specified. Align is equals to center. So here also same thing. The last one, the last row, the single column I want to occupy 2 columns. Align is equals to what? Center. And close the TD tag. Now here, simply I want to display a message I want to display here called enter username. Enter username. Enter what? Username. And beside this, I want to create a text box I want to create here. So in HTML, there is nothing but input. Input type is equals to what? Type is equals to text. Input type is equals to what? Text to be specified. Enter username, open a TD tag, input type is equals to what? Text I specified. Okay. Next in the second column, enter password. The second column, enter password. Enter password and TD input type is equals to what? Input type is equals to password. First thing is a name, enter name, and we take a text box we created. We get a text box we created. Next, enter password, and we get another text box we created. Okay, this is a HTML file. We created this HTML file. We created. What is the HTML file name? Login.html is a file name. We created a HTML file. We created. What is the HTML file name? Login.html is a file name. So now in the activity class, we get one more button called HTML, right? In our activity user interface, there is one more button called HTML. We configure the click event also we configure. So when user clicks a HTML button, it's going to call this HTML block is going to call. And if this condition is going to be true when you click the HTML button. Okay. We placed a HTML file, we placed in the assets folder, we placed a HTML file. I want to display that HTML file I want to display now. So WebView dot, there is a method called load URL is a method. WebView.load URL is a method. Specify the URL address here. It's a file basically. So file. So 3 forward slashes Android underscore asset. Android underscore asset slash your file name dot html. Login.html is a file. File Android underscore asset slash login.html. So we are displaying the login page we are displaying in our application. HTML file we are displaying in our application. Okay. Let's run the application and see what will happen. Want to install the app in Samsung device. Okay. So app is installed. Select this HTML button. When you select this HTML button, it's displaying the HTML file, but we forgot 2 things we forgot. To add a title and the bottom of the button we forgot to create. The HTML file we created only empty columns we created here. Column span is equals to 2 align center, but we have taken any, we have not given anything here. Okay. First I want to display the title I want to display with the large text. Let's take H3 login form. And in the bottom of the screen, I mean the last row, I want to create a button. I want to create called input type is equals to button. Input type is equals to what? Button. And what is the value you want to display on button? Let's specify the value. I want to display this value. Login is a value. Okay. So call span is equals to 2. So in the last row, in the table last row, we create a button we created called login is a button we created. Okay. Let's run the application. So click on this HTML button. So once if you click the HTML button, it will display the HTML page, it will display on the WebView component. So if you click on the HTML button, it will display HTML page, it will display on the WebView component, it will display. This is what the HTML page we created. This is what the HTML page we created. And if you touch on the screen automatically, you'll get these zoom controls also you'll get automatically. Because we enable that. Programmatically we enable set built-in zoom controls of enable true. Okay. Written that logic. So we provide the zoom controls also we provide. So now here, if user is given any input in the text box, this is how to display the HTML pages. Simply you can create a web page, simply you can create a web view or one HTML file you can create, and you can display that HTML file, you can display on web view component, you can display the HTML. But now the challenging thing is, if user is given any data in these text boxes, for example, it's a HTML file, right? If user is given any data in these text boxes, how to get the data from these text boxes? That is the biggest challenge now. For example, username I specified it's a Mahesh. For example, password I specified as Durga is a password I specified. Username and password I specified. And when I click this login button, username and password I specified in the text boxes I specified. Username and password I specified in text boxes I specified. So when user clicks the login button, I want to get the data from these text boxes. I want to get the data. I want to get the data from these text boxes. I want to get the data. This is a requirement. But we cannot get that one. We cannot get the data because it's not like it's not an XML file. It's XML file. Then we know that how to get the data from these components. Simply we use find view by ID method we use, and we'll get the data from that particular UI component we'll get. But the find view by ID method find view ID method will not work here because it's not an activity XML. It's not an activity XML. It's a HTML file. Okay, so now here the most important thing, the last one, that is how to get the data from the HTML UI components to your Android activity. How to get the data from the HTML UI components to your Android activity. So this logic we had right now. How to get the data from the HTML UI components to our Android activity. Okay, so here let's see. This is a HTML page we created, right? This is a HTML page we created. If you want to configure the click event, if you want to configure, our requirement is when user clicks the login button in HTML, we want to get the data we want to get. We want to get the data we want to get into our Android activity. We want to get the data. That is a requirement. That is a requirement. We'll see how to do this one. So we create a button we created called login button. We created a login button we created. So first we had to configure. First we had to configure the click event. We had to configure for this login button. I'll repeat again. First, we had to configure the click event. We had to configure for this login button. We had to configure the click event. Okay. So here, for the button, if you want to configure the click event, the first thing is we had to apply this attribute. We had to apply first. For this login button, if you want to perform any action when the button is clicked, there is an attribute called onClick is the attribute. What is the attribute name? OnClick. on click is equals to, for in the HTML button, we have to configure this on click attribute. We have to configure for the HTML button. On click is equals to, specify a method name. Let us take, I'm specifying the method name or function name. I'm specifying the function name as login is a function. I created a login button. I created a login button. And I configured the click event. I configured the click event. I configured for the button. And what is the method name I specified? Login is a method name I specified. Login is a function name or method name I specified. Okay. So whenever user clicks the login button, we are calling a method called what? Login is a function name or method name. Internally, when user clicks the login button, we are calling a function. We are calling, what is a function name? Login is a function name. So where you had to create this login function? We had to create this login function. We had to create this login function. We had to create in the JavaScript. This login function we had to create in the JavaScript. We had to create that login function. So in the HTML, in the header tag, in header tag, in HTML header tag. So let's open this tag called script. Script language is equals to JavaScript. Let's specify this one. Like same, like how we configure the method name in case of your Android activity. In the XML file, we'll configure the on click. We will configure Android colon on click is equals to. We'll specify function name. We'll specify. Here also same thing, and here also we are configuring for the HTML button. We are configuring input type is equals to button, on click is equals to login. Meaning call this login function when user clicks the button. Okay. So now this login function we had to create in the JavaScript. Script language is equals to JavaScript. Here, let's create a function here. In this JavaScript, create a function. What is the function name? Login is a function. Okay, write the logic in this login function. The logic you wants to perform. Whatever the logic you wants to perform. Okay, my requirement is simple. I want to get the data from these text boxes. I want to get the data because here, in case of Android user interface, we know that how to get the data from the UI components. Simply we use find view by ID method we use, and we'll get the data from that particular UI component. But here, it's a HTML, right? We have to get the data from the HTML UI components. I have to get. So we configured the on-click attribute. We configured on-click is equals to login is a function name we specified. This function we created in the JavaScript. We created this function to get the data from these UI components. We had to configure an ID. We had to configure for these text boxes. So let's configure the ID. ID is equals to, I'm giving the ID as name is ID. ID is equals to what? Name is ID I configured, and input type is equals to password, and ID is equals to password. Input type is equals to text, ID is equals to name, and input type is equals to password, ID is equals to what? Pass is a ID. Now we had to get these two components, this name and password. These two components we had to get into our this name and password. We had to get these two components. We had to get into JavaScript. We had to get these two components here in the login function. One second. Just. So function login is a function name. Let's declare a variable here. Where let's declare a variable here. Variable for name is equals to document dot, there is a method called get element by tag name of, get element by tag name of, let's give the what is the id you specified for this one. Get element by id, document dot get element by, get element by id is a method where name is equals to document dot get element by id is a method name. So here we have to specify the id, we have to specify what is the name we specified, what is id we specified, name. This is one thing. Next, where password is equals to document dot get elements by id of password. So now what we did up to now, we created a HTML file we created. In that HTML file, we created a login button we created in the HTML file. We created a login button we created in the HTML file. So when user clicks this login button, we are calling a function we are calling here. What is the function name we are calling? Login is a function name. Okay, when user clicks this login button, we are calling a login function we are calling. We're calling a login function we are calling. Okay. So in this login function, what is the logic we are writing? What is the logic written? We return the logic to get the data from these text boxes. We created two text boxes we created. One is for name and one more thing for password. We are getting the data we are getting from these text boxes. We are getting the data. Document dot get element by ID of name, get element by ID of password. But we require the value we required. We require the value we required from the particular text box. So right, dot value, dot value. So we are getting the value we are getting that from that particular UI component. We are getting the value we are getting. Okay, one thing is done. We are getting the data we are getting from the HTML UI components. From the HTML UI components, we are getting the data we are getting from the HTML UI components. Okay, we are getting the data we are getting from the HTML UI components. We are getting the data, but from where to where you are getting the data into JavaScript. You are getting, when user clicks the login button, we are getting the data from these components. We are getting the data, and we are giving the data we are giving to the JavaScript, meaning now the data is available in the JavaScript, the data is available, not in your Android code, Java code. The data is available in a JavaScript, the data is available, not in your Android code. How to send this code to the Java file, I mean your activity file. See, the most important thing, last thing, by using JavaScript interface, by using JavaScript interface, by using JavaScript interface, we can provide a communication between, by using JavaScript interface, we can provide a communication between HTML user interface and Android activity. By using JavaScript interface, by using JavaScript interface, we can provide a communication between HTML user interface and Android activity. We can provide a communication. Okay, meaning you can send and receive the data from HTML file to your Android activity. Okay, so there is a method called WebView dot. WebView dot. There is a method called get settings is a method. WebView dot get settings dot add JavaScript interface is a method. WebView dot get settings dot add JavaScript interface is a method name. WebView dot get settings dot add JavaScript interface is a method name. First parameter we have to specify class object. We have to specify in the first parameter. First parameter we had to specify the class object. We had to specify in the first parameter, and second parameter is nothing but interface name. We had to specify in the second parameter. First parameter is a class object, and second parameter is what? Interface name. We had to specify in the second parameter. WebView.getSettings.add JavaScript interface. First parameter is the class object. Second parameter is the interface name. Second parameter is what? Interface name. First thing is a class object. Second parameter is what? Interface name. Now here, by using second parameter, what is second parameter here? By using the second parameter, what is second parameter name? Interface name is the second parameter. Second parameter is what? Interface name. By using second parameter, that is interface name, we can communicate with the specified class. We can communicate with the specified class methods and variables from JavaScript. By using second parameter, what is second parameter here? Interface name. By using second parameter, interface name, we can communicate with the specified class, meaning what are the class you specified in the first parameter. Because what is the first parameter we had to specify? The first parameter we had to specify the class object we had to specify in the first parameter. First parameter we had to specify the class object, and second parameter we had to specify what? Interface name we had to specify in the second parameter. First parameter is a class object, second parameter is the interface name. By using the second parameter, that is the interface name, we can communicate with the specified class methods and variables from JavaScript. We can call these methods and variables. We can call the methods and variables, we can call from JavaScript, we can call the methods and variables. Okay, so try to understand this statement, the last statement. WebView.getSettings add JavaScript interface. First parameter is a class object and second parameter is what? Interface name. By using the second parameter, what is second parameter here? Interface name is the second parameter. By using this interface name, we can communicate with the specified class methods and variables from JavaScript we can call. Okay, we can call these methods and variables you can call from JavaScript. We can call these methods and variables. Okay, so in your program, we configure the logic we configure in JavaScript. Okay, so in your activity class, but this data, whatever the data we received in the JavaScript, this data we had to send to what? Android activity file, we had to send this one. So in your main activity.java, in the onCreate method, we had to add one method we had to add, that is WebView dot, there is a method called add JavaScript interface is a method. WebView dot add JavaScript interface is a method. First parameter we had to specify the class object we had to specify in the first parameter. First parameter we had to specify what? Class object we had to specify. I'm specifying the class object as this. I'm specifying the class object as what? This is the class name I specified in the current class. Second parameter is nothing but name. Interface name. You can give any name you can give here. My interface is a name I specified. WebView.add JavaScript interface. First parameter is a class object. I specified this. I mean in the current class, in this main activity class. Second parameter is the interface name. You can give any name you can give as an interface name. The second parameter I specified as my interface is a name I specified in the second parameter. Second parameter is the interface name. Second parameter is the interface name. I given the interface name as what? My interface is a name I specified. First parameter is a class object and second parameter is the interface name. I specified the interface name as what? My interface is a name I specified. Now by using this second parameter, what is second parameter we specified? My interface, right? By using the second parameter, we can communicate with the specified class. What is the class we specified in the first parameter? This, the current class. We can communicate with the specified class methods and variables from JavaScript we can call. Okay, let's declare a method here. Let's create a method called public void display MSG is a method. Public void display MSG is a method which is taking two parameters as input. One is a name and second thing is what? String password. In our activity code, in our Java code, we created one method we created. What is the method name? Display MSG is a method which is taking two parameters as input, string name and password. Okay, now in this method, what I'm doing is I'm displaying the data I will display in a toast message. What are the data we are receiving in this display MSG method, the name and password, the details will display in a toast message. Name, just to print in the next line, name and password. These two things I want to display in a toast message, I want to display. What we are doing in the display MSG method, we are receiving two parameters, name and password, and we are displaying the data we are displaying in a toast message, we are displaying the data. Okay. Now, by using the second parameter, what is second parameter here? My interface. By using second parameter, we can communicate with the specified class, methods, and variables from JavaScript. Copy this my interface, and there is a method called display image. By using the second parameter, that is an interface name, we can call that particular class methods and variables we can call from JavaScript. So in the JavaScript logic I'm writing here, in JavaScript, my interface dot, what is the method name? Display MSG is the method name, which is taking the two parameters as input. One is a name and comma password. One is name comma password. In HTML, we create text boxes. We created in the HTML. We created a login HTML button. We created and we configured the click event for this login HTML button. So whenever you click the button, we are calling a login function. We are calling in the JavaScript. We are calling a login function. We are calling in the JavaScript. Okay, from JavaScript I'm sending this name and password. I'm sending to the Android activity. I'm sending from the JavaScript. I'm sending this name and password. I'm sending to the Android activity. I'm sending this name and password. So in the Android activity, there is a method called display msg. We are calling the display msg method from JavaScript, and we are displaying the data we are displaying in a toast. Okay, and the last thing is nothing but which method you want to call from JavaScript. Which method you want to call from JavaScript. Which method you want to call from JavaScript. Add the following annotation. Add the following annotation on top of the method. Okay, that is add JavaScript interface. Add JavaScript interface. So we have to specify the interface name. We have to specify which method you want to call from JavaScript. Which method you want to call from JavaScript. Add the following annotation on top of the method. What is the method name? Annotation name. Add JavaScript interface. You have to specify the interface name. You have to specify. Okay. So now in our code, on top of this display msg method, in our code, on top of this display msg method, let's add this annotation at JavaScript interface. Which method you want to call from JavaScript? Which method you want to call from JavaScript? Add this annotation on top of the method declaration at JavaScript interface. Let's run the application now. Let's run the app. We're installing the app in Samsung, guys. Okay, app is installed. App is installed. And click on this HTML button. App is installed. When you click on this HTML button, this HTML icon is there, right? When you click on this HTML button, display the HTML page. It will display login form, the username and password. Let's give the username and password. I'm specifying the username as Mahesh is the username I specified. Meaning we are giving the data we are giving in a HTML, we are giving the data. We are giving the data, we are giving HTML, we are giving the data. And when you click the login button, see here, we got a toast message. We got Mahesh and password we got as undefined. We got, meaning there is some mistake with your HTML code, what is the ID we specified? Dot value. It's just spelling mistake, Alice. So, this HTML icon, display the HTML page. What is the username and password? Click on this login button. So we got the details and we are displaying the details. We are displaying in a toast message. We are displaying the details. We are displaying the details. We are displaying in toast. We are displaying the details. Okay. So this is how to transfer the data from HTML UI components to Android activity. We written this. We designed this UI in HTML. We design. But where written the logic? This toast message logic. We written in the activity class. We written that logic. So briefly, I'll tell you what we did. We created a HTML button we created. When user clicks the HTML button, so display a HTML file. So for displaying the HTML file, first we created an HTML file we created in the assets folder. Create a folder called assets by selecting app, new. There is an option called folder. In folder, select this assets folder. You'll get assets folder. You'll get. In this assets folder, I created a HTML file I created called login.html. A simple table with a total two text fields. One is the name and password, and we create a button we create. When user clicks the login button, we want to execute some action we want to execute. So that's why I configured the on-click attribute I configured for this HTML button. On-click is equals to login. Login is a function name we specified. So where you had to create this login function? We had to create this login function. We had to create in the JavaScript. We had to create that login function. Script language is equals to JavaScript. In JavaScript, we had to configure that function. We had to create function login. So we are getting that name and password. We are getting that name and password. We are getting, and we are sending that name and password. We are sending to the activity class. We are sending. So in activity class, we create a method called display MSG is a method. Display MSG is a method which is taking the name and password as an input. Okay. From JavaScript, we are sending that name and password. We are sending to the activity class. Display message method. We are sending the two things, name and password. Okay. And we are displaying the data. We are displaying in a toast message. We are displaying the data. We are displaying the data. We are displaying in a toast message. We are displaying that data. Okay. So this is HTML to Android activity communication. The most important, because a lot of people are going to ask you in the interviews also. Is it possible to design the user interface in HTML than the XML? Yes, it's possible. WebView will act as an interface between the HTML files and your Android activity. Okay. So any queries?